Let's talk about one of the recent outages like WannaCry, right? While there is this traditional data breaches which would take months to detect, and the impacts are in millions of dollars, like one study says 3.62 million for each data breach. And there are hundreds of data breaches are occurring and thousands of breaches occurring. But from that point zero to, it took only 2 hours to spread across the enterprise.
Welcome to another episode of Pioneers of Possible, the show that connects you with the futurists, leaders, dreamers, and builders who have reshaped what's possible in the worlds of business and technology. I'm Des Blanchfield, your host and fellow technologist. And today I have the pleasure of having Chandra Pulamarasetti in the studio with me. Hi, Chandra. How are you?
Hi, Des. Thank you. I'm doing great. And how's it going with you?
Yeah, it's going great. Now, just for folks listening in, I should explain that yet again, I have a guest from the other side of the planet with me. I'm here in Sydney at nearly 11 o'clock at night, and it's dark and it's very warm. We're on the end of a day that was about 35 degrees Celsius. But you're in Bangalore in India, where it's, I think you said it was about 10 degrees, and it's about 5 p.m. in the afternoon. Is that correct?
That's right. It's 5 p.m. on a cold, wintry day for Bangalore. 10 degrees is cold. And it's just getting to night right now.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for making time to catch up with me. Now, just to quickly introduce you, Chandra, so you're the Vice President, and you kind of wear a couple of hats from what I understand. You're the Vice President of both the Resiliency Services Strategy part of GBS, as well as the Resiliency Orchestration software part of the service delivery. For folk who haven't quite come across you yet or met you, could you maybe just introduce yourself briefly and just give us a quick outline of what those two job titles or roles actually are?
Resiliency Services is the arm within IBM, which is handling business continuity and recovery aspects for our customers worldwide. So this is a global business unit for IBM across the world. And it's part of our infrastructure services unit called Global Technology Services. And we are a very sizable business, multi-billion-dollar business. And we handle thousands of customers' business continuity and recovery. And so I lead the strategy, global strategy for this resiliency services in ensuring that we have the best of breed solutions and technologies and processes for the customers as they are digitizing their businesses. And the second part is that IBM, the resiliency services is leading a lot of its services with a software offering that we have called Resiliency Orchestration, which is essentially transforming the business continuity DR for customers through a technology so that the customers' demanding recovery objectives can be met through this technology. And this used to be a company called Synovi that I had co-founded and was heading as a CEO, which IBM acquired. So I continue to handle that business too within Resiliency Services.
Maybe we can just take a bit of a step back and just a little bit of insight into you personally, if we can. We were talking earlier on, and I was really keen to get you just to share some insight around some of your early influences. You mentioned that very early on your dad or your father was actually a very strong influence to you and gave you a lot of drive to, I think you mentioned he came from a farming background, that he really wanted you to get a solid education and get out and do great things in the world. And that I think you mentioned a lot of kids in the village that you grew up in didn't often get that opportunity to get an education. And I think I made a note that you said that essentially your father drove you to kind of aim for that sort of leadership, focus and get out and do great things. I'd love to hear a bit of the insight and kind of how that drove your outlook to life in general and kind of that influence your dad had on you.
I came from an humble village in southern India, and my father with a farming background and the entire family, they would farm, but then he was a very, very hardworking, and I would say he was the visionary type. And he worked to get schooling into the village. The village had only elementary school, so he worked as a leadership. So he would go out and then work with a lot of people to get some. Finally, he managed to get a higher school for the village. Then he always wanted all of us to be educated because he had seen. I guess I don't know where he got his vision. That he had seen that high education means you can actually grow up and then learn a lot in life. So he worked he worked quite a bit for us, I must say. And then I used to watch him that morning 7. His drill used to be morning 7 to night 11. And that's the kind of hard work. He was doing multiple jobs. One side farming, another side he used to go out and then work in some as an employee in another company there. So that gave a strong impression to me that when nobody around me was actually getting educated like this, but here is someone pushing us to do his best to give us the best. So I said yes. So then I can at the least take that opportunity and learn maximum. And so studies and then working hard came naturally to me. I was able to go into some of the best schools run by the state in India and through some competitive exams. But I think with his push and effort, I think he created right opportunities and then really worked hard and studied well in my childhood. As a result, I was able to get into some good colleges, and with his background of he was a leader, and he was also like the president for the village. So he was doing some of those roles as a leadership role. So that impacted me, I guess, in some way. So I wanted in the childhood to actually become in India what we call a collector or an IAS officer, Indian Administrative Officer. By doing competitive exams. But somewhere along, as I was getting close to my college, this whole computer industry revolutionized coming up. This is in late 80s. So when this whole computer industry was coming to India and then booming, so somebody advised that, hey, this may be a good thing for you. And I was fascinated. I guess I had that zine to go off and then do this technology. So I was fascinated, and then I just happened to have taken a computer science branch in my college. And that sort of was set and my pace in, and then I really enjoyed, ever since I came into the computer programming, to do a lot of innovation, technology, development, research, and then thoroughly enjoyed for my first part of the career. But however, this management interest started setting in as I was doing about 10 years into my career. Then I started thinking, okay, so I guess I wanted to go into management. And one thing led to the other, and then I founded a company, and then I'm here in IBM managing a business.
I love hearing those backgrounds because I think there's been a couple of generations of late. I've just turned 50, so I'm old enough to kind of be able to talk about this stuff and reminisce. But there have been a couple of generations, in my view, that often forget where they've come from, or they don't always look back and sort of recognize some of the foundational and supportive and inspirational drivers in their lives. And certainly our families, and in my case, friends of the family, inspired me to go and do great things. You also did a BS in computer science. Tell us about that experience, because I believe you went on to then co-author about 5 patents from memory.
Yes, so this institute where I studied was one of the premier institutes, and it has an education modeled after some of the Western universities, popular Western universities. And so it had a very, very cosmopolitan culture, open environment, and best of the labs. So I remember, I was actually doing deep programming in the Motorola architectures and x86 architectures, assembly programming and stuff, right? We were doing quite deeply in those days. And I think that was a lot of interest, I built a lot of interest into the computer science. It naturally came to me. And from there, I went on to work with Wipro Technology Systems as an initial job. And then from there, I went to United States to work for Sequent. And I spent a lot of time at Sequent, where I built some of the finest and best symmetric multiprocessing and non-uniform memory access NUMA systems. You said you were there too at DES. I guess we never worked together. I guess we never interacted together, but it was a great company to a technologist to write stuff or develop stuff, or a technology or someone to go and then create a solution, because we were solving most complex problems those days for some of the largest companies in the world, right?
Absolutely. And yes, when we were talking earlier, I made a note that I'd had read that you were both at Sequent and Sun Microsystems. I think you were at Sequent somewhere around about the early to mid-90s, 95, 96 era, and then probably later Sun. But Tell us about the transition from Sequent to sort of Sun and then beyond to founding Synovi.
Yeah, so with a solid background at building a lot of these large-scale, solving complex problems and technology, and in multiprocess systems. So I got the opportunity to work at Sun and then at a company called Auspex, where it was pioneering NAS file servers. So I did work in those two companies briefly for an year each, and then I had this opportunity through some of my friends, founded a company in the storage industry to offer storage as a service and backup as a service. This was all back in 2000.
Wow.
This was when the Exodus data center model was just taken shape, and we built large-scale solutions and tools to manage. I remember about like 2,500 terabytes of data in 2000 across about 600 customers. These were several .coms as well as some medium-sized companies who had wheeled in their servers into the Exodus data centers, and we would serve with some of our technology solutions that we put in those data centers. So I was in this company, which raised a lot of capital in those days, but I had joined that as an employee one. I did this for about 3 years, and that sort of built a lot of solutioning experience for me from an hardcore technologist, moved into build the solutioning where you are managing that kind of terabytes of backup through tools like Veritas and third-party backups with storage tech libraries and all that those days. And you had to have some management software to simplify and get some insights, and then the ability to very effectively utilize the resources that the common resources which were used to manage these 600 customers across the board. So that's the time where we developed tools, and that is also the time we found that DR as a service, and we were just beginning to do DR for a couple of customers. They said, yes, you're doing backups, you're doing storage and demand, because for storage, we had these high-end Hitachi systems. And they said, you got Hitachi boxes across data centers, so why don't you offer us DR as a service by connecting them with replications? So we started that service, and then we realized that the DR space is a void. There is a gap. There is no management software. You have management software for automating backup. You have management software for managing heterogeneous storage, heterogeneous networks, but nothing for DR. So the idea of building a single console central orchestration for DR process was born at our previous company. And so the rest was that, so we came out of the previous company, and it took us about a couple of years to think through about this and then understand the space better. And then we started on an idea to build a management software back in 2005 and 6. Now, it took us a second round. So first few years, we were building a limited product around databases to recover database systems very quickly. And by 2009-10, we realized that it is a difficult proposition to really expand on. And that's when we got new investors, and where we extended the product horizon to what it is today, called Enterprise Resiliency Orchestration Software, which is cutting across all kinds of storage, all kinds of databases, all kinds of applications, and provides a single console view. So it is a long journey for us as a Synovi, but then we really feel proud that we are as a pioneer, and then we're glad to be part of IBM today, and then take the technology to massively to large-scale customers across the world.
I'd like to transition now, if we can, into the whole topic of cyber resilience, because I think that's very much top of mind for a lot of people. I'd love to get your insight around that space. I know there was a research by Ponemon this year, 2017, around the cost of a data breach. For example, they produced a study, and they were saying that for the average company, for a nominal data breach, the cost was something in the order of $3.6 million or something, and some amazing stats. Something like 68% of folk interviewed or in the study indicated the lack of ability to remain resilient in the wake of an attack. What I'd love to do is maybe just get some insight from you as to, what does it actually mean to be cyber resilient? What are some of the things that they should have top of mind that you're seeing every day, given that you are literally on the bleeding edge of this space?
Absolutely, Des. I think this is so important. And then I think you alluded that a little bit by talking about Ponemon study, right? Um, but let's talk about one of the recent outages like WannaCry, right? So now, while there is this traditional data breaches which would take months to detect, and the impacts are in millions of dollars, like Ponemon study says 3.62 million for each data breach. And there are hundreds of data breaches are occurring and thousands of breaches occurring. But you look at WannaCry, what happened? From that point zero to, it took only 2 hours to spread across the enterprise. And there are various studies, but one study estimates the data loss, the quantification was about $4 billion in a WannaCry across to the businesses. So from a traditional data breaches, now you have these kind of rapid attacks, what you call, which are proliferating so quickly in minutes, in hours, right? And so that's why cyber resiliency, and we all have seen a recent outage in Equifax, and where it is now not only a business loss, but it is impact going into the threatening the jobs of the CXOs and board members, right? So the impact is significant. And cyber resiliency traditionally was talking about, I can have an occasional outage. It could be manual failures, software failures, hardware issues, or natural disasters, right? But then now but those are rare to occur, few to occur. But cyber resiliency, where it is not in your control, it is something outside the organization happening, right? And as a result, you want to be really, really prepared for it. And what does cyber resiliency mean? Historically, when you were talking of security and you're talking of resiliency, security was mostly around preventive, proactively identify any attacks of access attacks, compliance issues, or any things that are coming onto the enterprise, data steal, data theft kind of things. So it is about preventive model of security solutions are about identifying vulnerabilities early on. Resiliency was focusing and selling, and then customers are deploying recovery solutions if there is an outage. Okay. Now, cyber resiliency has to see that these two have to come together. Your security solutions, ability to lead, ability to withstand, ability to detect and proactively protect organization from any attacks is all the security solutions have to be taken. And in case there are attacks that go through the defense circle, and then come in, and then you corrupt your infrastructure or corrupt your data, then you have to have a solid, resilient system so that you can recover your systems fairly quickly. So a cyber resiliency is a broader umbrella where you're talking of security solutions, you're talking of resilient to be able to recover faster. Then you're also talking about enterprise risk and how you're able to handle the risks pretty quickly overall as a business process level risks. So cyber resiliency is covering all three areas. And at IBM, we have looked at this so important. I mean, in some cases, CIOs are coming to us and saying, IBM, you are an advisor, so we need you to assist us and then telling us what is right and not right. And so we have we devised a comprehensive cyber resiliency life cycle, which spans all these three elements. And then which a life cycle that is so comprehensive that we look at and then identify any gaps that you have in across the board, and then provide a very integrated, effective solution so that the organization is resilient from these cyber attacks.
And I guess things get very, very difficult when, I mean, it's all well and good to have a great technology stack, but you're talking about some of the business challenges. I mean, over the last decade, we've seen frameworks like the EU-US data shield become a thing. And that got even more complex when the Swiss decided they wanted to add more to it. So we ended up with a sort of EU-US-Swiss data shield, and on it went. And then, we've got GDPR coming up next year, which is just, to me, it's like this freight train of a Y2K moment, which I don't think anyone's even fully comprehended myself. We've got other big challenges. I mean, in Australia, for example, since 1918 or even later and subsequently updated, we've had a very stringent Privacy Act around control of data, such that a lot of Australian state and federal government agencies and certainly large enterprises can't use cloud platforms because they don't comply to Australia's privacy laws. So we can't put it into a certain cloud provider if there's any risk that the data is going to move offshore. It's actually illegal. It's a jailable offence. But we've also got some other challenges I've seen with both government and enterprise across multiple countries. That GDPR is big and challenging, but even things like the Internet of Things. When we think about the IoT, most countries don't actually have a law that specifically pertains to IoT. Whether it's consumer protection, data protection, basic criminal law, civil liability, just basic standards, tax law, intellectual property, environmental, insurance, business law, certifications, contracts, all those components of law, things like the Internet of Things that we're rushing at with this data everywhere. Most, if not all, nations don't specifically have law that pertains to that. So companies are having to think about, well, how do we now put frameworks in place that account for that? Are you seeing organizations come to you now and say, look, this is so big we can't get our arms around it. We not only want you to resolve the resilience challenge from a technology point of view, but what can you do strategically for us? How do we, in plain speak from the boardroom down, just get a strategy and a roadmap in place so that we can even just get a language and a vocab, talk about it, because it's a very big challenge?
Yes, I think this is, IBM is managing the most of the world's largest businesses, right? And so naturally, we are managing entire IT for several customers and then organizations. So definitely customers are relying on us significantly. And it is a very strategic decision, very strategic with respect to how do you manage the risks, how do you manage the technology failures, how do you manage the application intrusions, and definitely how do you manage the recovery. So there are various angles to it. And so what we have is a very, very integrated, we devised a very integrated consulting approach, a consultative approach to the customers who want an advisory role for us. So where we'll go through a rapid consultancy for the customers and be able to point out and then give them a roadmap. Because there are multiple dimensions to this, right? And you have a lot of at an infrastructure level, you have these preventive technologies you are looking at it. Then you have a rapid recovery capabilities that you want to deploy. Then you're looking at Safe Harbor, which is like a new initiative in the industry from a banking industry, where you're saying that you got to have a air gap replication copy. That means you got to have a data copy which is outside your data centers, located in a completely third-party location, and it has to be cut off from the network in a safe place so that in case something happens to the data, you're able to recover from it. Because there is that roadmap that you have to feed into. And then definitely you have the operational risks covering all of this. So we have a consultative model using which we provide the customers a complete 360-degree view, covering the security, covering the networking, covering the resiliency, and then covering the business risks and all that provided. So this is a big boardroom topic, and then we are constantly helping our customers day in and day out.
As we come up to sort of a half an hour, I'd love to, as I mentioned earlier on, I'd love to hand you a virtual crystal ball and get you to gaze into it for me if you could, because I'm really keen to get your view of kind of what's coming up in the next either 12 to 18 months or 3 to 5 years, depending on how far you're comfortable looking forward in the crystal ball. Where are we going to be in a year or two or a couple of years in this space, and what can we expect to sort of see coming over the horizon?
I think I would like to address that in a couple of ways, Des. One is, I think, on the technology side, I really think that this whole journey into cloud and cognitive, they are going to play a big role in this whole resiliency. The cloud and cognitive, cloud is changing the shape of resiliency significantly. Because cloud is trying to define the singular unified system across the world, and it is absorbing a lot of resiliency components into it. So from the customer side, they're all going into the backend into a monolithic large system. And a lot of resiliency is moving towards what we call it becomes simply a workload migration. When your workloads migrate from one cloud to another or one data center to another, one location to another, the resiliency underneath has to be naturally automatically managed.
Chandra, thank you so much for making time available at the end of your busy day there in Bangalore in India. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to learn a bit more about you personally and also get some insights into your professional background and career and what you're doing around resiliency. It's been great to just to get to know you and to learn about your topic.
Des, thank you so very much for your time and interest in this, and I really enjoyed our conversation. Great to know that you were we both worked at some companies in the past, and absolutely, I look forward to this and many more discussions go forward. Thank you.
Hi there, this is Des. Thanks for tuning into my Pioneers of Possible podcast series. I trust you've had as much fun listening to this episode as I had producing it for you. Now, before you go, I have an exciting exclusive offer to share with each and every one of you. You've heard me talking with IBM's best and brightest right here in my podcasts. Now you get to talk with them in person yourself. And here's how. IBM have given me an exclusive offer to give you, my wonderful followers and listeners, a free one-on-one session via phone with an experienced IBM expert. To book your call with an IBM expert, simply click on the expert advice link in the show description. And be sure to let me know how your IBM expert session goes by tagging me in a tweet with your feedback. Thanks again for tuning in, enjoy the rest of the series, and I'll look forward to talking with you on Twitter soon.